Welcome to Stalingrad, winter of 1942, where the city's skeleton of ruins whispered secrets of the living and the vanished. Red Army soldiers patrolled streets littered with shattered glass and frozen corpses. Yet some swore they saw their own faces, reflected in the smoke, in the rubble, in shadows that should not have been there. Entire squads disappeared overnight. Fate unknown. Only echoes remained. A strange reflection in a cracked helmet. A whisper behind the gun turret. Impossible to explain. November 1942. Stalingrad. Artillery thunder rolling across the frozen Volga. Smoke curling from burned-out buildings. Red Army units dug in, hunkered down in cellars counting rations and the missing. Sergeant Ivan Petrov noted strange occurrences in his journal. Shadows moving against the light. Voices calling names that no one had uttered. A city trapped between life and death reality and something else. Before we begin, leave a comment. Tell us where you're watching from, and the exact moment this story made your skin crawl. Share the chill, the weight, the shadow that followed every step. The city of Stalingrad in November 1942 was no longer a city. It was a battlefield carved into ash and ice. The Volga River churned beneath the winter fog. Fragments of boats and cargo drifted aimlessly. Frozen corpses of civilians lined the banks, forgotten. Artillery fire rolled across the horizon. Distant echoes of machine guns rattled through shattered streets. Soldiers moved cautiously among collapsed buildings. Every shadow seemed to breathe. Every window reflected something that was not there. Red Army units had dug in among the ruins. Trenches cut through rubble like scars on the earth. Patrols ventured out in pairs or threes, often never returned. Sergeant Ivan Petrov, a meticulous man in his late 20s, recorded every detail, every patrol that vanished, every fleeting reflection in broken glass. He wrote in his journal, "The city watches us as much as we watch it. Faces in smoke, shapes in ruins, whispers that do not belong to any living voice." His words etched with a trembling hand. The weather was merciless. Temperatures plummeting to -20 degrees Celsius. Frost crept into the joints of rifles. Boots froze to wooden floors of shattered buildings. Yet the soldiers pressed on, driven by orders, by duty, by the desperate need to survive. Rations were scarce, water often frozen. Sleep was a luxury. And still they saw things, shadows moving against the logic of light. Footsteps echoing in alleys they had just cleared. Fleeting shapes vanishing when approached. Reports filtered back to command. Squads missing. Entire companies unaccounted for. The language of the dispatches was clinical, precise. Unit 317 reported missing. Fate unknown. No further communication. Yet in the whispers of the men, a different story took shape. A story of fear, of unease, of reflections that moved independently, of doppelgangers seen in mirrors of shattered windows, of fleeting apparitions hovering just beyond the flicker of candlelight in the makeshift barracks. Folklore seeped into the cold. Older soldiers spoke in hushed tones of the watchers in the smoke, of spirits trapped between the living and the dead, of echoes of those who fell before. Petrov noted their mutterings. He did not dismiss them. Instead, he recorded them with a detached fascination. Some claimed to see their own face smiling back from a puddle of frozen water. A face that does not belong, yet speaks of the life we have yet to live, or the death we cannot escape. Such lines filled his journal, a blend of observation and fear, tangible and spectral. The streets themselves became a maze, buildings reduced to skeletons. Doorways gaped like empty mouths, hallways littered with personal effects. Letters, photographs, trinkets frozen in time. Some soldiers paused, sensing eyes upon them. Yet no one was there. Only the wind, or so they told themselves. The wind carried voices, names called softly, sometimes a whisper of a mother's song, sometimes a taunt from a comrade long gone. Every sound magnified by the emptiness, every shadow a potential enemy, or a reflection of themselves. Petrov's unit endured a siege of both human and spectral terror. Nights were the worst, darkness swallowing the fractured city. Artillery flashes turned shadows into monsters. Snowflakes danced like spirits over bodies. Every movement seemed alive. Every sound amplified. Men reported seeing figures standing atop rooftops, staring down, faces obscured, yet familiar. A chilling familiarity. It seemed the city itself remembered the dead. It mirrored them back to the living. Letters sent to the families often omitted details. The official reports sterile, missing in action, fate unknown. But inside the barracks, whispered accounts circulated. He looked into the window and saw himself, but not as he was. He smiled, and then he was gone. Such stories became part of the unit's secret language, part warning, part legend, part reality twisted by fear. The physical exhaustion compounded the psychological strain. Men suffered frostbite, hunger, and exposure, yet the visions persisted. One soldier described seeing his reflection move independently, mimicking actions he had not performed, turning his head when he did not, staring with eyes that conveyed knowledge he did not possess. He collapsed the next day, never spoke of what he saw. Only why the journal entry remained. Petrov carefully transcribed it, as though recording a natural phenomenon. Yet the fear was undeniable. The intersection of fact and folklore blurred further with each passing week. Soldiers began avoiding certain streets, certain rooms. Whispers of those who vanished in the middle of the night. Shadows following patrols. Cries in alleys with no one present. Even command officers began to question the reports. Were these hallucinations stress-induced delusions, or something else entirely? Petrov noted patterns. Reflections often appeared near the ruins of former homes, locations where civilians were last seen, where entire families disappeared. He began mapping them, a lattice of missing men and unexplained sightings, each location marked by cold silence and fear. He wrote, "The city remembers. It holds them. And sometimes it returns them, in ways that defy reason." The journal pages dampened by frost, yet the words burned with an eerie accuracy. Even as day broke, the city remained a place of haunting. Sunlight struggled through smoke, turning rubble into long shadows. Soldiers moved cautiously, aware that each moment could bring a new horror. Reflections appeared in puddles, in shards of glass, in the frozen metal of abandoned vehicles. Some spoke aloud. "Do you see it there? Behind me, only to find empty streets." Yet the feeling lingered. The shadow of themselves, their doppelganger, an echo of fate yet to come. And so November 1942 pressed on. The city of Stalingrad, a liminal space, where life and death, reality and reflection converged. Men wrote what they saw, yet questioned what was true. The line between soldier and ghost blurred. Every day a struggle, every night a confrontation with their own shadows, and every reflection a question: who survives and who merely watches. Reports filtered back from the front lines, units listed as missing, patrols that never returned. The official language was precise, clinical. Unit 521 status unknown. No further communication. Yet within the barracks, whispers told a different story. Soldiers murmured of figures appearing where no one should be, shadows that moved independently of light, reflections in shattered glass that smiled when the man did not. Sergeant Petrov wrote of these accounts meticulously, blending the official with the personal, recording not only dates and names but the sensations, the fear, the uncanny. In his journal, Petrov described a night when a group of scouts vanished near a collapsed schoolhouse. The street empty, footprints leading into debris, and then nothing. No bodies, no signs, only an eerie stillness. The wind carried voices, faint echoes repeating their last orders. The men who saw it refused to speak. Fear rendered them mute. Petrov noted, "They are gone. Yet I feel their gaze, always upon us." A simple sentence yet weighted with dread. Folklore among the men grew rapidly. Old soldiers whispered of the voices of the fallen, spirits trapped between life and death. Some claimed that a soldier could see his own double, a reflection that acted independently, a warning of death yet to come, or perhaps a reminder of sins not yet paid. One private swore he saw his reflection waving from the rubble, and when he turned, there was no one, only silence and frost covering the broken streets. Documents from command occasionally hinted at anomalies. Unexplained disappearances were often attributed to miscommunication or fog of war. Yet Petrov and others observed patterns. Missing men always correlated with areas heavily bombarded, collapsed buildings, sections of the city with the most civilian casualties, a lattice of death. And then, something more. Strange footprints, impressions in snow, sometimes leading nowhere, sometimes circling back, as if the city itself was moving them, reshaping reality. Soldiers began to avoid certain ruins, doors marked by scratch marks, walls stained by blood that should have been cleaned long ago. One lieutenant reported seeing a shadow fall across the wall, in the shape of a man he knew, the same man who had been killed the previous day. He froze, and the figure disappeared when approached. Only the echo of his own heartbeat remained. Petrov wrote, "We are watched, even by those who are no longer here, or by ourselves." A chilling observation, a line where fact meets fear. The city's geography became a trap. Streets twisted by destruction, alleys blocked by rubble, every building a potential tomb. Soldiers felt the weight of history pressing down. Ghosts of civilians, soldiers, and even animals haunted the ruins. Footsteps in the snow, shadows in doorways, windows that reflected not what was, but what had been. Petrov mapped these occurrences, noting time, location, and witness statements. The lattice of fear grew denser. The city, a living archive of the vanished. Men began seeing doppelgangers in the simplest reflections. Puddles of water frozen over, shards of glass from broken windows, fragments of metal. Even the polished surface of a rifle barrel could betray a movement. A face that was theirs, yet not theirs, moving independently, watching, judging, warning. The psychological strain became apparent. Letters home omitted these details. Official reports denied them. Yet in hushed tones, every soldier knew they were not alone, not just in the city, but within themselves. The folklore extended beyond the living. Tales of spirits guiding or misleading patrols, shadows standing watch at crossroads, fires burning in abandoned homes, cries heard in cellars, children calling names that no one remembered. Petrov noted in a rare moment of vulnerability, "I cannot distinguish the living from the echoes, and sometimes I am afraid I have become one of them." The line between reality and myth blurred, fact and superstition merged. leaving the soldiers trapped in a liminal world. Even the most pragmatic officers began to question their perceptions. Maps no longer matched the terrain. Patrols reported seeing streets where none existed. Entire neighborhoods rearranged by the night. One sergeant recounted seeing a platoon marching through an alley, only to discover the same alley completely blocked by rubble the next day. Petrov recorded, "You move through ghosts, yet some ghosts move through us," a note that would haunt future historians. The snow and ice carried sound differently, amplifying whispers, muffling footsteps, turning the smallest creak into a proclamation. Soldiers reported hearing voices reciting orders from weeks before, sometimes their own names, sometimes the names of those long dead. One diary entry described a soldier following a voice into a building, only to find a mirror reflecting him. And then, a second reflection, waving, smiling. He fled, and was never seen again. Rumors spread of the Stalingrad reflection, the notion that the city returned your image, sometimes alive, sometimes dead. A warning, or a curse. Some soldiers refused to look into any reflective surface. Others embraced it, daring fate. Yet almost all recorded a lingering unease. Petrov's final note in this section read, "The city holds us, and sometimes it returns us, in forms we cannot comprehend. We are both observer and observed, subject and specter, an eerie synthesis of fact and legend. Everyday life merged with the supernatural. Rations were shared silently. Prayers whispered in abandoned churches. The living kept watch for the dead sometimes keeping watch for the living. Artillery fire punctuated this rhythm. Each shell a punctuation mark. Each echo a reminder of fragility. Soldiers adapted, yet their eyes betrayed fear. Reflexive glances at shadows. Hesitation before turning corners. Listening for footsteps where none existed. Petrov's journal, a mixture of meticulous record and haunted observation, became a cornerstone for understanding Stalingrad's winter. Not just the battle, but the human experience of surviving within a city that had become a mirror of death. Reflections, apparitions, and whispers intertwined with the tangible horrors of war. The fact layer and folklore layer existed side by side, indistinguishable, each reinforcing the other. Reality bending under the weight of memory, fear, and the city's silent testimony. And so the city continued, soldiers moving cautiously through ruins, reflections watching them, shadows following, whispers persisting. Each day a negotiation between survival and understanding, and every night a confrontation with what may not be explained, with what cannot be recorded, yet cannot be ignored. The very fabric of Stalingrad, weaving the lives of men into its frozen, shattered lattice. A place where history, myth, and terror converged. Amid the frozen ruins of Stalingrad, tales began to grow like frost on the broken walls. Whispers that carried through the ruins, passed from soldier to soldier, each retelling adding a shadow, a pause, a hesitation. Stories of the voices in the smoke, spirits trapped between the living and the dead. They were called to warn or to curse. No one was certain. Some spoke of the doppelgangers, reflections that acted independently, figures appearing in puddles and shards of glass in the glint of a rifle barrel. Soldiers claimed these figures mimicked movements, but with subtle differences. A tilt of the head, a smile that was not theirs, a glance that carried knowledge the soldier did not possess. Fear took root in these moments, and superstition flourished. One account tells of Private Mikhailov. He had been on patrol along the Volga. A sudden flash of light from a broken window, and he saw himself, standing in the snow, staring back. But the reflection raised a hand in warning. Mikhailov froze. Then the figure vanished. The patrol returned to find him shivering and silent. For days he would not speak. Only scribble symbols in the snow, symbols no one could understand. Old soldiers recounted stories passed down from the campaigns of Moscow. Tales of the shadow watchers, entities said to appear before ambushes, warning or sometimes luring men to their deaths. Petrov documented these stories, not dismissing them, recording them with the same precision he gave to battle reports, noting time-place witnesses and his own impressions. He wrote, "They walk among us, unseen, yet their presence is tangible. We feel their gaze. Sometimes it follows the living. Sometimes it returns what is lost." A chilling observation of belief and experience intertwined. Every night soldiers whispered in their bunks, of apparitions in the alleyways, lights that flickered in windows long shattered, footsteps that circled then disappeared, cries of children echoing from empty cellars. The snow muffled all sound, yet carried others, voices indistinct, half-formed words, sometimes names, sometimes curses. One lieutenant swore he saw a woman in a tattered coat walking among the corpses. She pointed at him, and then dissolved into mist. The city became a canvas for these stories. Buildings were haunted not by ghosts alone, but by memory. The war had carved traces into the walls, echoes of laughter, of screams of life, and the soldiers interpreted these echoes as sentience, as warnings, as omens. Some avoided certain streets, certain alleys, noting that shadows lingered longer there, that reflections in broken glass seemed sharper, more alert, more alive. Petrov's journal contains numerous accounts. One describes a sergeant who, upon entering a collapsed library, saw books fall, though no wind moved them, and a silhouette of a soldier among the stacks. He aimed his rifle. Nothing. Yet the shape lingered in peripheral vision, moving silently, always observing. The sergeant fled, never returned. The journal notes only he is gone, yet I feel him watching still. The line between legend and report blurred. Fires in the ruins created strange illusions, smoke twisting into human shapes, shadows flickering on walls. Soldiers swore the flames formed faces, familiar and unfamiliar. Some said the faces spoke, murmuring names of the living or of the dead. Others claimed the fires revealed passages, doors that did not exist, windows that led nowhere. Yet the men who entered were found days later, disoriented, muttering, changed. Petrov also noted the stories of animals, stray dogs following patrols, cats appearing on rooftops, seeming ordinary, yet their eyes unnaturally bright, glowing in darkness, moving with intent. Soldiers joked nervously, yet no one dared strike them, for fear of the city's spirits. These creatures became omens, indicators of safe paths or impending danger. Folklore entwined with survival. The psychological strain amplified the supernatural interpretations. Fatigue, hunger, frostbite, the mind grasping at patterns. Yet some events defied explanation. Footprints in fresh snow, appearing to circle, leading nowhere, or a distant figure that vanished when approached. Petrov's notes are meticulous. He separates fact from interpretation. Yet the fear, the dread, the uncanny seep through every line. The folklore layer is inseparable from lived experience. Whispers also told of the silent choir, the dead whose voices carried in the wind, singing or moaning, depending on the listener's state of mind. Men reported hearing orders repeated, sometimes in familiar tones, sometimes distorted. Their own voices echoed back, with added inflection. A warning, a plea, a prophecy. Soldiers avoided the wind's direction, covering ears, muttering prayers. Some wrote down the words, later found them in their own hand, though they swore they had not written them. Even meals and routines were touched, utensils moving without contact, blankets tugged from beds, shadows slipping through doorways, each unexplained event feeding the stories, each night reinforcing the fear, each account expanding the legend. Petrov's unit lived under constant vigilance, for the living, for the dead, and for the reflections of themselves, for what might follow, or what might already be lost. The city became more than a battlefield, more than a collection of ruins. It was a living myth, a mirror of war, of memory, of death and persistence. Shadows and reflections intertwined. Every corner held a potential story, every broken window a stage for the uncanny, every footstep a drumbeat in the rhythm of fear. Soldiers recorded, whispered, and remembered, because the city demanded it, and sometimes it returned what was taken, in ways neither fact nor reason could fully explain. And so the legends grew, a tapestry of whispered stories, observed anomalies, and the weight of history. The soldiers' reality intertwined with the ghosts of the city, reflections staring back, shapes moving independently, voices calling names, the folklore layer embedding itself into the rhythm of survival. Every day a negotiation, every night a confrontation, with the city itself, with the shadows, with what may never be fully understood. The echoes of Stalingrad did not end at the river. They carried beyond the shattered streets. Whispers traveled with the wind, across battlefields, across time, other cities, other ruins. The motif of reflection, of the vanished, of shadows following the living, repeated, haunting. A pattern emerging in the chaos of war. Soldiers recalled tales from Kursk, from Moscow, from battles long past, accounts of vanished units, of patrols never returning, of apparitions moving in the periphery, faces that mirrored their own, movements that contradicted reality, shadows that observed silent, patient, relentless. Stalingrad became part of a larger rhythm, a universal pulse of conflict and fear. Petrov noticed it, the similarities between events, the pattern of disappearance, the recurrence of the reflection motif. Wherever war tore through civilian streets, wherever rubble became shelter, the shadows followed. The city itself seemed to remember those who walked it, and returned them, in fragments, in whispers, in reflections, always testing the minds of the living. One account describes a squad moving through a bombed-out factory, shadows elongated unnaturally across the walls. Footsteps echoed from above, though the upper floors had collapsed weeks prior. One soldier glimpsed his own face in a puddle, yet it moved differently, turning smiling, signaling caution. He froze, and when he blinked, the reflection was gone. His companions found him hours later, muttering of voices that had never spoken, yet had guided him, or perhaps misled him. These motifs, vanishing, reflection, observation, became ingrained in the soldiers' perception. The city shaped their understanding. Every pattern reinforced fear. Every unexplained sound, every shadowed corner, every unexpected silence. The motif repeated, an unspoken law of the urban battlefield, that survival required attention not only to the enemy, but to the unseen, to the echoes of what was and what might never be. Beyond the city, stories spread, Letters returned with no address. Reports filed with no resolution. The same motif appeared. Soldiers reported seeing figures resembling themselves in villages previously held by the enemy, sometimes performing actions they had not taken. The uncanny became a currency of survival, a warning, a test of perception. Those who ignored it often vanished, leaving only whispers in the snow. Petrov's journal connects these occurrences, meticulous notations of place and time, correlations with other units, other regions. The motif is unmistakable. The reflection of self, the observation by an invisible presence, the disappearance without trace. He wrote, "The phenomenon repeats, not random, not coincidence. A shadow follows every step, a mirror to fate, a message from the city, or from something older. He never knew the source, only the effect, and it was undeniable." Soldiers began to anticipate the motif, wary of broken windows, reflective puddles, the glint of ice, hesitation before entering a room, caution before moving through a hallway. Their own reflections a potential threat. The motif became part of training, part superstition, part instinct. Sometimes saving lives, sometimes leading men to safety, sometimes luring them to the vanished. Stories of the motif crossed unit lines. Whispers became legend. Do not trust the reflection. One soldier advised another, "It may smile, but it does not wish you well." Another recounted seeing a double of himself waving from a rooftop. He froze, and the figure vanished. The lesson etched into memory. Motifs repeated. Not only in Stalingrad, but in every ruin, every battlefield, where war and fear intersected. Even the enemy spoke of similar phenomena. German patrols noted figures moving independently, shadows in alleyways, faces that mimicked their own. Communications intercepted mentioned the city watches, the dead guide. The reflection deceives. Evidence that the motif transcended sides, transcended logic. A universal pattern emerging from chaos. A shared human response to incomprehensible destruction. Petrov recorded these motifs with almost obsessive precision. Connecting threads between vanished squads, reflected faces, unexplained sounds. The narrative of the city of war of the unseen took shape, each repetition reinforcing the sense that the battlefield itself was alive, observing, recording, reflecting back the living, reshaping their experience. The soldiers' perception of the motif altered their behavior. Movement became cautious, conversation subdued, pauses at windows, hesitation before stepping into open streets. The rhythm of life in the ruins synchronized with the rhythm of shadows. The motif was a guide, a warning, sometimes a harbinger, sometimes a mirror. Always present, impossible to ignore. The motif also permeated personal observation. Petrov writes of men who would see their own doppelganger moving ahead in the street, performing actions before they themselves did, leading patrols into ambushes or away from danger. The motif was both literal and metaphorical, a reflection of fate, of fear, of the invisible influence of history. In the quiet hours when artillery paused, and only the wind carried sound, the motif asserted itself. Whispers in rubble, shadows in hallways, reflections in shards of ice, each instance reinforcing the larger pattern. A lesson embedded in terror, a rhythm to which soldiers unconsciously attuned. Survival dependent not just on skill, but on recognition, on awareness, on acknowledgement of the motif's presence. Petrov's final observation in this bridge section reads, "The motif repeats, city shadow reflection, vanishing observation. Each instance a thread in a tapestry of fear and survival. We are both participants and witnesses, observers and observed, and the city, it remembers. The words linger as if the city itself were speaking, repeating its motifs, echoing through time. Night fell over Stalingrad, with a weight unlike any day. Darkness swallowed the ruins. Cold seeped into every crack. Artillery fire distant yet persistent. Shadows lengthened, flickered, moved. Soldiers in the trenches and shattered buildings were alert. Yet something beyond vigilance gnawed at their nerves. A presence, unseen, but unmistakable. Sergeant Petrov recorded a peculiar sequence in his journal. A patrol of 6 men ventured into the remains of a collapsed theater. Letters and sheet music scattered across the floor. The light of lanterns painted the shadows, long and sharp. Suddenly, a reflection appeared in a puddle, not of the soldiers together, but individually. Each reflection acting independently, stepping forward, pausing, staring, warning, or mocking. The men froze. Whispers rose. A voice soft and alien repeating their own names. The air thick with the scent of smoke and damp stone. Then, one of the reflections smiled, and the soldier it mirrored vanished, leaving a boot behind, frost-covered, shaking. The others fled, returning to the unit in silence, their eyes hollow, their breaths shallow, and the missing man was never seen again. Official reports would later mark him as missing fate unknown. But Petrov's notes preserved the terror. Other accounts merged with his. The footprints that appeared to circle then vanish. Rifles and equipment displaced. Objects falling without contact. Whispers in empty hallways. Soldiers encountering figures of themselves in collapsed cellars. Each story reinforcing the sense of inevitability. The city itself dictating terms. The shadows enforcing rules unknown. Petrov wrote of a lieutenant, bold, pragmatic, skeptical. He entered a burned-out apartment. A mirror hung crookedly among the debris. His reflection looked back, smiling, mimicking movements he had not made. Then the reflection turned and pointed to the window. When the lieutenant looked, nothing, no one. Yet a moment later, one of his men was gone, the mirror reflecting only an empty room. The lieutenant fell to his knees. The journal notes only, "We are observed, even when alone." And the observer shapes what will occur. A chilling acknowledgement of forces beyond comprehension. Even simple survival became fraught. Meals disrupted, rations vanished, blankets tugged from beds, boots displaced. Each incident minor in isolation, yet cumulative, each amplifying dread. Men began to anticipate the presence of reflections, avoiding certain puddles, mirrors, and shards of glass. Yet the phenomenon persisted, adapting, finding new ways to manifest, never predictable, always unnerving. Petrov's mapping of vanished patrols revealed uncanny correlations. Every disappearance coincided with locations where reflections were reported. Patterns emerged, a lattice of lost men and fleeting images, suggesting the city itself was a participant, not passive, its ruins alive with memory, with observation, with judgment. Every corner of the shattered city a stage for the inexplicable. One particularly haunting entry recounts a soldier entering a corridor lined with collapsed walls, flickering lamplight casting shadows. Suddenly a figure stepped from the darkness. It was him, his own reflection, smiling, gesturing toward an exit. The soldier followed, only to emerge into a courtyard where several comrades were missing. The remaining men fled, yet the reflection lingered, standing in a doorway, watching, waiting. The journal ends. We obeyed what should not command, and learned that obedience does not guarantee life. These events were not confined to Stalingrad alone. Similar reports filtered from other embattled cities. Soldiers spoke of reflections acting independently, vanished patrols, objects moving without cause, whispers in the dead of night, a recurring motif linking disparate theaters of war. Petrov's observations implied a universal law, a shadowy presence entwined with human perception, war amplifying fear into reality. Petrov also described conflicting testimonies. Soldiers swore to see comrades alive in the ruins, only to find them confirmed dead. Discrepancies impossible to reconcile. A doppelganger observed actions the living had not performed, sometimes saving lives, sometimes ensuring disappearance. The boundary between reality and reflection dissolved, leaving only uncertainty, terror, and fascination. The psychological weight reached its zenith during the nights of deep frost. Darkness pressing on broken walls, men huddled in basements, lanterns dim, shadows flickering against walls like living creatures, whispers soft, seductive, threatening, commanding attention. One soldier rose to investigate a sound and never returned. The unit found no body, only his rifle pointing toward a cracked window, the reflection of his own eyes frozen in glass, staring back, accusing, warning. Petrov noted that these occurrences altered behavior. Soldiers moved cautiously, hesitated at doorways, avoided reflective surfaces. Yet the reflections adapted, appearing where least expected, in water puddles, ice glass, polished metal, even in the corner of one's vision. A constant reminder that in Stalingrad, shadows were not idle, and reflections were not benign. As the winter wore on, Petrov recorded the cumulative effect. Exhaustion, fear, frostbite, hunger, combined with the uncanny manifestations, creating a reality where survival depended on anticipation, on recognition of patterns, on acknowledgement of the shadow's influence. Mistakes were fatal, and the vanished proved the point. The climax of this haunting experience crystallizes in one final entry. A patrol of 4 men, including Petrov, moved through the remains of a theater, lantern light flickering, shadows dancing, reflections moving contrary to expectation. One by one, his comrades vanished, leaving only echoes. The journal ends abruptly. We are watched, and watched again. The line between living and lost dissolves, and even I may not endure the next shadow. The words linger like smoke, unresolved, terrifying, inevitable. Stalingrad, in that winter of 1942, became more than a battlefield. It became a crucible, a place where the living confronted the unseen, where reflections held power over life and death, where shadows enacted their own rules, and where memory, fear, and the city itself conspired to test the limits of human endurance. Every day a negotiation, every night a confrontation, the climax of experience, the height of terror, and the moment where fact layer and folklore layer converged into a single chilling reality. The winter of 1942 slowly receded, yet the echoes of Stalingrad lingered, streets frozen in ruin, rubble immovable, footprints erased by drifting snow. The soldiers who survived carried the memory, but so did the shadows. Reflections that had watched, that had guided, that had judged. They did not vanish. They remained, in corners of shattered buildings, in the glint of frost on broken glass, in the quiet moments before dawn. Sergeant Petrov's journal ends abruptly, pages torn, ink smudged by frost and fear. Yet the words linger, a final observation of the city, the shadows, the reflections. He wrote, "We are never truly alone. The city remembers, and sometimes it returns what we cannot explain. No elaboration, no resolution, only an invitation to wonder, to question, to feel hustle the weight of the unseen." Soldiers told stories long after, whispers in other units, other cities, echoes that stretched across time and space. The motif repeated, shadows and reflections following wherever chaos and fear prevailed. Vanishing patrols, fleeting images, voices in empty streets, the boundary between reality and perception forever blurred. A reminder that war is measured not only in loss of life, but in the ways the mind absorbs terror and how memory becomes its own battlefield. One cannot walk the streets of Stalingrad or anywhere scarred by war without sensing the residue of what occurred. The city holds its secrets. The dead, the vanished, the reflections of those who remain. Perhaps some are watching even now, waiting to be noticed or to notice. The living who dare to tread among ruins. The echoes of fear and courage intertwined. Shadows persisting, unbound by logic, unbound by time. History records events, dates, names, outcomes. Yet the human experience whispers reflections, unexplained phenomena, slips between the cracks. Petrov's notes serve as a reminder that some truths cannot be fully documented. They can only be felt, observed in fleeting moments, recalled in memory, in nightmares, in the quiet awareness of a shadow where none should be. We leave Stalingrad in the cold, soldiers moving cautiously through streets that have become mirrors, reflections of loss and resilience, fear and determination. The city in its ruin preserved both the tangible and the spectral, each corner a testament, each shadow a question, each reflection a silent story, echoes lingering. What became of those who vanished? And what of the shadows that remained? Did they guide the living or claim them? Were the reflections hallucinations or windows into a reality beyond perception? These questions have no answers, only the sensation, the doubt, the lingering chill of what might be. As we step back from the ruins, we are left with silence, the weight of the unknown, the uneasy recognition that in war, and perhaps in life, some things are meant to remain unresolved. The city keeps its secrets, the shadows watch, and the reflections wait for those willing to look. You have just witnessed another account from Shadow Stories, another story from the streets where history and the uncanny collide. If you want to uncover more, subscribe and follow the stories where shadows linger, reflections wait, and the unexplained persists. And so the question remains, who watches when no one seems to be there? And when you look into the ruins of history, do you see yourself or something else? The city remembers, the shadows remember, and perhaps you will too.